All right, hi everyone. Welcome to this very special. Now it's April, so we're talking NFL draft, pre-draft edition. I believe in Bills, presented by FanDuel. I'm Adam Beane of WGRZ TV and Sports Talk Live Buffalo. Sal Majorana, Rochester Democrat and Chronicle, as always, and our man in the middle today, very special guest. Good to have him back here on the program, Chris Trapasso, draftgradebook.com, brand new website for him. So all kinds of draft information there. Chris, welcome. How you doing? It's you're like an accountant in tax season right now, aren't you?
100%. It's like right around tax season too. So it's like it actually works out really well. My wife brings it up to me all the time that I'm like doing these radio spots and podcasts like in a ridiculous concentration over a 6-week period, and certainly in the month of April, which I'm glad is here, and I'm certainly glad to be on this show.
Yeah, I was at the Combine, and I was talking to Chad Ryder from NFL.com, and I made the remark to him, because I interviewed him to get some perspective, and I just said, man, we could not do our jobs without you guys doing what you do. Brugler at The Athletic and the guys at NFL.com, and now Chris. Chris has been doing it for a while, but now he has his own, like Brugler has the Beast, and Chris has got his thing, which we'll have to come up with a nickname for that, Chris. Yeah. But I've gone through it already, and it's just great information. People should, if you're interested in the draft, Chris knows a hell of a lot more than Adam or I combined, but really, really great work. And like I said, we in the media at this time of year, we couldn't do our jobs without the guys that are doing that draft work like you do, Chris. So I'll shout you out here. Really appreciate you helping us out the way you do.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, so it's obviously hard to nail this down, especially at 26, right? And looking at the Bills, any number of directions that they could go. I mean, Sal and I have both given our opinions last several shows here that we feel its defense is going to be the priority there. Even though with the trade for DJ Moore and everything else, there's still that sort of public fan-based cry for a receiver, and some media members feel that way as well. Let's just start generally here. I mean, what do you feel as if, given the changes, new head coach, new defensive coordinator, obviously we know about Brady, we're learning about Jim Leonard. What's your sense of, let's just say, which way the wind is blowing as we begin to assess this draft from 26 on down?
Yeah, even though we are in the month of April, I think it's important to remember that things and the buzz change a lot as we get closer to the draft. I think the week of the draft in early, like April 20th, April 21st, that's when we can maybe get a better crystallization. But I agree with you guys. I think along the defensive line, probably at that stand-up outside rush linebacker spot, that is a position that really was just not part of the Sean McDermott era at all. All of their defensive ends were big, long, from AJ Epinesa, Greg Rousseau. A lot of their bigger players at that position were 3-down guys that were really good against the run and okay pass rushers. They had to obviously trade for sign Von Miller, sign Joey Bosa. I think Brandon Beane and especially Jim Leonard want that speedy, bendy outside pass rusher that can get to the quarterback in like under 2 seconds, which is just something that this team has not had. And I think that will be the number one priority at pick 26 in April.
And that's not Bradley Chubb, right? I mean, Chubb is not going to be that player for them, but he's going to be a 3-down guy who can handle the run. But he's not that speed rusher, especially at his age. So with that in mind, Chris, we've been saying right along that I like how they're going to look at that edge position with Chubb, Rousseau, and Michael Hoyt, assuming he's going to come back completely healthy, which, he probably will. But there is that lack. They don't have that one element of, like you said, the immediate speed guy. So in this draft, and again, factoring in they're going to be picking at 26, what do you see? I mean, I've heard some names. I mean, Cashes Howell, despite his short arms, is a popular pick. There's a couple other guys, but why don't you kind of go through a few guys that could be available at that 26 pick?
Well, yeah, I'll start with Cashes Howell because I think he's the most likely to be there and is the exact type that the Bills want. He reminds me, and my comparison for him is Bryce Huff, who is a thorn in the Bills' side from the New York Jets. He was undrafted out of Memphis. Cashes Howell is probably going to be a first or early second rounder. Arm length in the 0 percentile. He is like some of the shortest arms we have ever seen at the edge rusher spot at the Combine. But if you're watching Texas A&M the last 2 years, everything that he did on the field looks like first round caliber. His burst off the line is tremendous. He had the fastest 10-yard split of any edge rusher. And I think having spent time with Nick Bonito, I think Jim Leonard is okay with you being a little bit smaller at that 6'3", 240-pound range. If you can just get off the ball, wrap the corner, and flatten to the quarterback, that's what Cashes Howell can do. So he's a name that I think the Bills fans should very much familiarize themselves with, because he would just make a lot of sense, and he's probably going to be there. The other name that I think would make a lot of sense is TJ Parker from Clemson. Did not have the career at Clemson that I think a lot of the Clemson fans hoped they would have gotten from him, because he was a huge recruit. My comparison for him is Rashawn Gary, who was a similar type at Michigan. Big recruit, didn't quite live up to the hype, and has actually turned into a really good pass rusher for the Packers, who got traded this offseason, or who signed elsewhere this offseason, but is a 60, 70, and at times he's been an 80 pressure a season type player who's very good standing up, rushing the outside shoulder of the offensive tackles with speed, bend, and some power to his game too. He's a little bigger than Howell. So those two, I think, will both be there, and both kind of consensus-wise feel like they should be late first-round picks at that edge rusher spot.
So back to Howell. How? I mean, I get all that you said, and I watched the highlights. But how concerning should it be with the arm length when he gets to the NFL, when he's going to be playing against technicians at tackle who are going to have 3 to 4 inches, not only on arm length, but we're talking 60, 70 pounds in girth. So, I mean, that's the worry I think that people have. And history shows that these short arm guys, no matter how good they've been, have struggled in the NFL. How much is that truly a concern, Chris?
It's a concern, like, absolutely. And like Ruben Bain, the edge rusher from Miami, who I think people watch him on film, they're like, oh, it's a top 5 pick all day. But you have to factor in, he has super duper short arms too. And that could be part of the reason why he slips a little bit in that first round. I think with Howell, I'm not as concerned as I am with Ruben Bain's arms, because Ruben Bain uses his arms a lot. He's a pass rush technician that wants to initiate contact and could do it in the ACC and even in the college football playoff. Howell wants to win without the offensive tackle even touching him. He is off the ball and around the corner before that offensive tackle can even get his hands on him. So it still will be a problem at times, because like you're referencing, there are all offensive tackles in the NFL, 33 to 36 inch arms, and he has 30-inch arms. He is never going to be able to initiate that initial contact. So it's a concern, but I think the way that Howell wins actually mitigates some of that concern that he has, again, 0 percentile length in that arm category.
So is that the reason primarily why you think he'd be there?
Yes, I think if he had, and this might sound nitpicky, but this is how NFL teams do it with the draft and how much they care. If he had 32-inch arms or even longer 33-inch arms, I think he'd be a top half of the first-round pick because of the production that he showed over the last 2 years in the SEC, and the bend and speed that he has, I think, is really unparalleled in this class. Even the top guys, Bain, David Bailey from Texas Tech, don't have that ability to dip and bend around the corner. It's not quite Von Miller-esque, but there are shades where you're like, wow, that is top half of the first round talent. The size kind of should knock him into the 20s, I think.
So if they don't go edge rusher in the first round, to me, there is a concern that there's no second round pick. So they're going from 26 and they're going to have to wait all the way to 91 if they don't make a trade, which, knowing Brandon Beane, he might still pull something off. But if they have to go all the way to 91 to address edge rusher, assuming they do it at 91, we're talking third round, late third round. What do you see there? Is there a guy that might be sitting there in that range that they can go with?
Yeah, definitely. I think you can make a case that the edge rusher spot is the deepest in this class. And I think for the Bills, I'm sure we're going to talk wide receiver. We have to talk wide receiver, right? Wide receiver is another very deep spot. I think there's a edge rusher that I actually have compared to, in his best case scenario, Nick Bonito, Kieran Crawford from Auburn. His teammate, Keldrick Falk, is probably going to be a top 20 pick. He's bigger, longer, but 6'4", right around 250 pounds. He's not crazy big, but that same style of rusher where he just wants to get off the ball and wrap the corner. Almost 8 times out of 10, he's going to try to win with an outside speed rush. Did show some ability with his pass rush moves. He's a name that certainly would make sense. Our Mason Thomas feels like from Oklahoma that he might be picked a little bit earlier. And then one other name that I really like that I do think will be there at 91 is Michigan's Derek Moore. He is the classic body type to be that stand-up rush linebacker, and that's really the style of defense that Michigan has utilized the last couple seasons in Ann Arbor to have those stand-up rush linebackers. And Derek Moore was very productive over the past couple of years on some good defenses as that, hey, we're not really concerned about the run, but just get after the quarterback and generate push from the outside. So Derek Moore from Michigan is another name that I think would make sense on day 2 for the Bills with that 91st pick.
All right. So, Chris, you just said the R word as part of that response. So let's go to receiver right now. And we heard Brandon Beane talk out at the owners' meetings in Phoenix as well. And, of course, he's going to say that, if there's a player we like there at 26, we would add at receiver, despite the trade for DJ Moore. That's just obviously the smoke and mirrors game that you play, that all GMs play around the draft. He's not going to show his hand in any way, shape, or form. So I guess I would ask you, to what extent do you think that's true? And given the receiver class, who might there would there be a receiver in your estimation there if they wanted to go that way? That would be, from a value standpoint, you don't see their board. You assess it based on your own instincts and knowledge and all of that and research. Is there someone who would be worthy of that pick at 26 who might fall there?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to frame it, that certainly Brandon Beane is not going to show his hand. I do think, and certainly you two can speak more to this than I can, I do think Brandon Beane is reasonably candid compared to most GMs, where he's not just giving the GM speak all the time. But I don't think it was like a flat out lie that there's no way they would pick a receiver. I think
I don't either.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That I think it is pretty unlikely at this point though, because of the DJ Moore trade. And I do think it's important for Brandon Beane to just say, hey, like, we might pick a receiver. The name for me is Casey Concepcion. And that's probably one that you've heard a lot. You guys have probably talked about him a lot. I think he has the 3-level separation ability that has been severely lacking on this Bills roster the last even 3 or 4 years, when they're averaging 30 points a game. Outside of Shakir and Kincaid, when he's been healthy, they don't have separators. They don't have guys that can routinely beat man coverage. And they've really leaned into these bigger body, the Keon Coleman types, that have just not really worked well with Josh Allen and have not been able to get open. So Casey Concepcion, and someone that I ironically think at his best could be DJ Moore, is Omar Cooper Jr. from Indiana. He's not a tremendous athlete, similarly sized to DJ Moore. He breaks a ton of tackles and is a running back after the catch, just like DJ Moore was at Maryland. There's starting to be some buzz that he could be off the board. Like he may be picked in the top 20, which I think would be a little bit rich for him because he's not a tremendous athlete. But those two, Concepcion and Omar Cooper Jr., if they aren't as into the edge rusher idea as we are, or a lot of those guys are gone, I would be completely fine with either of those guys being the pick, because I still think it's a sneaky need for this Bills offense.
See, now here's my thought on receiver. I think the only way they would consider and then go ahead and pull the trigger on a receiver at 26 is if they're planning to trade Keon Coleman. And we've heard nothing but Joe Brady saying he's going to be on the team, and we still think his best is in front of him. Brandon Beane has also said that if they don't move from Keon Coleman, I just don't know why the Bills would need to pick a receiver in the first round, especially they just signed Trent Sherfield, who's probably going to take that Tyrell Shavers number 5 role to be a blocker and a special teams guy. I don't know where you fit. Where are you going to fit all these guys when you have clear needs on the defense? That's why I've kind of completely moved off of wide receiver in the first round. Now, that being said, Chris, never hurts to bring in competition. So again, I'll put it to you. 3rd round is where I don't care about day 3. I just never really cared about day 3. I want to know about day 2, 2nd round. They don't have one. So 3rd round, is there somebody there that would fit the Bills and bring some competition to the room at that spot at 91.
Definitely. I mean, we have seen over the last decade plus so many quality receivers picked in the second and third round. So I think teams, I mean, certainly a lot of the best players at that spot were picked in round one, but the Bills can feel good about, hey, we're going to pick someone like Ted Hurst from Georgia State, who I adore. I actually have a late first round grade on him. I think if he was at a bigger school, not Georgia State, maybe he doesn't have quite the numbers that he did at Georgia State, but the traits at like 6'4" and 200 pounds with the explosiveness and the rebounding, the football ability down the field, I think it wouldn't be crazy at all to suggest that Ted Hurst is a first round caliber talent, but because of the small school label, I think he could be there at 91 and is someone that I think could transition reasonably quickly coming from the small school level to the Bills. A few other names, different style wide receivers. Brennan Thompson from Mississippi State is the polar opposite of Ted Hurst in terms of size. He's like 5'9", 170 pounds. Reminds me a lot of Brandon Cooks when he was coming out of Oregon State in 2014, and he was a first rounder. Brendan Thompson ran the fastest 40 at the receiver group this year. I think the fastest 40 of all players in Indianapolis, but is a really good route runner too. He has quickness to his game. He's not just Marquise Goodwin who can get down the field but can't separate. So those two names are really interesting. And then one that would kind of be in the middle that's not as flashy, but I think could be a solid player is Jeremy Bernard from Alabama. He's a great blocker, which I think the Bills will always like to kind of play that up. I don't think that's the most important thing, but very smooth. He's someone that I think at the intermediate level on the dig routes, posts, corners, pretty smooth getting open, catches everything, and was never a super high volume guy at Alabama, but was just routinely making solid plays throughout his career there in Tuscaloosa. So he's a name that I wouldn't be overjoyed and think, oh man, like they just drafted a future All-Pro, but he's someone that feels like is going to be a solid, like Robert Woods type for 10 years in the NFL.
All right. So, I mean, we've talked about some of the primary needs anyway. We haven't really hit linebacker per se. We'll do that after. And I think safety is another area we'll touch on. But since we're kind of hovering day one, day two, that sort of a thing, let's get into, Sal suggested this a little bit earlier. I mean, it would not shock me to see Beane trade down from 26, given the fact that this draft is deep in some areas where the Bills do have some needs. What's your read on that? What's your gut tell you the percentage, chance that he might do that? That would be, because I know you got to know he wants that second round pick back. Yeah,
Adam, that's a fantastic question, and I think it's something that is pretty reasonable. I can't go in and saying, hey, like I'm positive that they'll do it, or I feel 90% chance, but what you're hinting at, I think Brandon Beane will want to get that second rounder back. And this draft in general, I know at 26 the Bills will frame it as, hey, it's kind of a early second round pick, it's not really a first round caliber guy. This class in general, though, at the top, in my estimation, and from talking to a few scouts that I know, other NFL draft analysts, it's not a blue chip heavy draft. It's not 2024 that had all the quarterbacks, Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison Jr. It's not really that type. So I could see them, well, what we just talked about, saying, look, all right, we like Cashes Howell, but we don't love the idea of him at 26. We like Concepcion, but his drops scare us at 26. Let's move back and just see who's available in what is a pretty big collection of what should be equal or similarly graded edge rushers and wide receivers. I think it would make a lot of sense, especially if they could even get a late second rounder or an early third rounder back to continue to build, because there are pieces that are needed more so on the defensive side than on the offensive side of the ball.
And what hurts this philosophy, though, and this, Chris, there's just no quarterbacks. Teams usually want to trade back into the bottom of the first round to get a quarterback. Ty Simpson maybe very possibly could be picked in the 20s by a number of teams. Pittsburgh, Cleveland, the Jets, maybe even I think they're picking at 16. That's the issue I think Beane's going to find, is it's probably going to be harder, at least it seems to me, in this draft, to move back from 26. Teams are going to say, no, we're just going to stay where we are. And I think he's going to have a tough time finding a partner. What do you think?
Yeah, that's true. I have seen a few mock drafts that have the Bills as actually the team that the Arizona Cardinals trade back into the first to get Ty Simpson. Right? Yes. If he's available, it's typically what happens, that teams are trading up for a quarterback. But like for as much as that is what is the first thought in our minds of when a team trades up, there's been a lot of wide receivers. The Bills traded up for Kyer Elam and Dalton Kincaid. Edge rushers have been traded up for. Last year, the Falcons traded back into the first for James Pierce, and they gave the Rams a first rounder this year, which was an absolute heist for the Los Angeles Rams. So it's not necessary. It doesn't necessarily have to be a quarterback. And I will say too, though, if Ty Simpson goes in front of the Bills and everyone else picking in the 20s and 30s will be overjoyed because it will obviously push down at least one better skill position guy to them at 26.
Okay, so a couple of other positions that Sal and I have talked at great length about, and I know that many others have as well. Linebacker, right? We know this is a very deep class at linebacker, and the feeling, is Terrell Bernard the answer ultimately? Dorian Williams, right? Like, obviously each have limitations and factors, durability, that sort of a thing with Bernard in particular. Safety, right? I feel like in this draft, they're going to address that position in a long-term way because they've addressed it short-term with some of the signings, obviously, with Gardner Johnson and Stone, but ultimately they're going to look for a long-term answer to pair up with Cole Bishop. Do you see it that way as well? And how do you see them maybe addressing each of those areas? Because I know that it's been talked at great length about in a more traditional sense, linebacker. Leonard's going to want sort of his guy, right? And this draft is deep at that position as well.
Yeah, it's a really good and deep linebacker class. Maybe doesn't have that blue chip talent necessarily at the top. Caleb Downs will be one of the picks in the top half of the first round at safety. But linebacker, I think it is more about the Jacob Rodriguez from Texas Tech in round 2 or round 3. Kyle Lewis, who kind of feels like more of a Sean McDermott type because he's smaller from Pittsburgh, but all around the football. I really like Caleb Alarms-Orr from TCU, and even Josiah Trotter. Actually, my comparison for him is Dorian Williams, more of that downhill hammer type inside linebacker in a 3-4. So to your question, Adam, yes, I think even with the Chauncey Gardner Johnson signing and bringing in Geno Stone as kind of a set the floor in the safety room type spot, I think they will address linebacker and safety in this class because there will be a specific type that I think Jim Leonard will want at that position that might be slightly different to what Sean McDermott kind of had as his archetype at both of those positions. See,
Chris, I've been banging this drum for weeks about linebacker. I don't know why linebackers get so disrespected in the NFL draft. The Bills need an every down guy. Dorian Williams is in his last year of his contract. We don't know what his future is going to be. Terrell Bernard, they could get out of that contract after next year. So there's going to be a need to get somebody in place who's going to be Jim Leonard's guy for the next 4 or 5 years. I don't understand why people push back on the idea of linebacker at 26, but plenty of them do. Couple names. C.J. Allen is one that comes up a lot for Georgia. Give me your thoughts on him first. And then you just said Rodriguez, a guy that I love. Why everyone thinks he's going to be a second or third rounder. All that guy did was make plays. So is it crazy to think he could be the pick at number 26? But talk about Allen first, then Rodriguez.
So Allen, I think obviously the pedigree and the long lineage of awesome off-ball linebackers from Georgia certainly helps him. He's one of the younger prospects in this class, which indicates that he's not a finished product, but has a lot of upside.
But he started from day one there.
Yes, he started from day one. Yeah, so I think that certainly helps him. Yeah, he's reasonably experienced relative to his age. I don't think he's tremendous in coverage right now. And if I'm drafting an off-ball linebacker in the first round, I think he has to be more coverage ready. But to kind of segue into Jacob Rodriguez, the coverage is there with him. I mean, he's an older prospect, so it shouldn't be that surprising. Former quarterback that transition to linebacker probably helps him understanding those route concepts behind him in coverage. I don't think Jacob Rodriguez is totally off the board or as someone that they might pick at 26, especially because he had a really good combine too. And typically the first rounders are the good football players that are also big time testers. So those are two names that I do think Bills fans have to keep in the back of their minds. I think for me, Rodriguez, I actually like a little bit more, but the upside and what you could close your eyes and envision CJ Allen being in 2 or 3 years might actually be a better overall player than the older Jacob Rodriguez.
Where do you have Anthony Hill in your rankings? Where do you think he's going to go? The kid from Texas.
Yeah, I have him. Let me look at my horizontal board here. Linebacker. I have him as like a third rounder. I'm not quite as high, but the length and the athleticism is absolutely off the charts with him in terms of being that off-ball linebacker. Some technical stuff, not an amazing tackler. And again, I'm a stickler for coverage, and I think from watching the likes of Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard that made a lot of plays in coverage, that is just something that I place a very high onus on, where I think a lot of teams ultimately get linebacker wrong in the draft because they look for the athleticism and the size, the blitzes, the old school run stopping, but they're lost in coverage. A lot of the first round linebackers beyond Jack Campbell that have been picked that have not been good, the Jordan Brooks, the Kenneth Murray, they look the part, but were so lost in coverage that teams would really start to target them in, on second downs and on third downs. I think you have to be a great coverage linebacker to hit the ground running in today's NFL at that spot.
And one more guy, the kid from Cincinnati, Golday, because that's another one. I love that guy. I love watching him play. The film that I watched on him. Where do you see him going? So also a great talker, Adam, which would really be good for us. But
so yeah, like he's one that I like more than Anthony Hill. And ironically, my comparison for him is Kiko Alonso. He's tall, kind of sleek, very comfortable in space. Tackling at times is not super reliable and didn't make a ton of plays on the football in coverage, but I think he has the size and athleticism to run with those tight ends down the seam. So he's a really intriguing option that, like Adam was hinting at, maybe that's something the Bills address later. And if he was there at 91, I think the Bills would be very excited because he kind of fits as being a bigger body, as being an inside linebacker in Jim Leonard's 3-4.
Okay. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, I'm muted. There was a dog, a slight dog eruption here in the house, and so I muted and kicked back in. But all right, so FanDuel, presenting sponsor for this show and others here on the Believe Network, projecting the Bills to retake the first place in the AFC East this season at minus 140. Obviously, more questions than answers for everyone at this point, but that's where things stand. Chris, I'll ask you about that, just your take on it in just a second here. But Sal, some other business to attend to here as well.
Yeah, ZipRecruiters is on board as a sponsor of the show, Adam. Big time of the year for college basketball. Final Four is coming up this weekend, and it's down to the final two by Monday. Is it going to be UConn? Because after that game against Duke, holy smokes, that was sort of unbelievable. Anyways, it's anyone's game. Regardless of who makes it to the final round, the one thing's for certain, takes the most talented people to build the incredible team. Same thing when you're hiring. If you want to do your business at the top of its game, you need to be having the best people on your team. The place to find them is ZipRecruiter. And now you can try it free at ZipRecruiter.com/audio. So give them a shout and start building your team today.
All right, Chris, what's your take, man? Bills back on top in the AFC East. I mean, we have some answers. We don't have all of them right now, and these are obviously projections. But given what New England's done, what they might do in the draft, that sort of a thing, how do you feel about that prediction?
Yeah, I think it still makes the most sense because even though what we saw, the huge breakout season for Drake May, where he almost won MVP in his second year, I still think Josh Allen is the best quarterback in the division. And I think if you're stacking the rosters up against each other, the Patriots roster is growing. It's better. They're obviously, 2 years ago, we're in a full on rebuild. But I don't think they have as many blue chip stars that the Bills ultimately have, and especially bringing in DJ Moore at a very important position. I think it will not be easy. It will be a slugfest. But as we saw, both of those Bills-Patriots games were very narrow games last year in terms of the overall margin of victory for both teams. So I think the Bills to lean on history and lean on Josh Allen a little bit over Drake May still makes the most sense for them to be the favorites going into the season.
And how about the changes we've seen in terms of head coach? Obviously, what he's done with the staff, and I think there's been a lot of good additions on the staff, and Jim Leonard at defensive coordinator, I'm anxious to see. I think that's the big question, right? How's that going to evolve on that side of the football? But there are these massive expectations of, Super Bowl or bust sort of a thing when Pagula makes the move and moves on from McDermott. I'm asking this because we haven't had you on the show since all of that went down. I mean, I feel like they're going to be, assuming they stay reasonably healthy, you're talking they're in a division round, maybe conference championship game, and it's coming down to a play or two, like it has in the past. That's where I kind of assess this team as being at. And within that framework, maybe, and obviously your own, I mean, do you feel the expectations are too high, or is there going to be a period of transition to a new and a first-time head coach, in Joe Brady? There are elements, plenty that we know about him, but a lot that we don't, too, in this particular role.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's framed really well. I think it wouldn't surprise me if in September and maybe into October, there's some growing pains. Maybe not so much so for Joe Brady. I mean, obviously taking on more of a CEO responsibilities like during the week, but he's called plays before for the last 3 years in the NFL. Jim Leonard has called plays in college and was a super successful defensive coordinator at Wisconsin, but has never called plays in the NFL. It's kind of somewhat of a different animal. Wouldn't surprise me because they are in somewhat of a transition mode in terms of the personnel on defense, that if it takes some time for what is a more complicated and more blitz heavy defensive scheme, at least on paper, to kind of find itself. But I do like you mentioned, a lot of the assistant coaches, they're younger, they have college experience, being able to gel with some of these younger players and maybe get more out of the scheme as opposed to divisional round. All right, Sean McDermott's leaning on the front four to get home, and they can't really get home. I think Jim Leonard will be able to manufacture more pressure than Sean McDermott's style defense did. So I think the expectations, what you outlined, are absolutely where they should be. That this is a team that's they'll never say this, but should be we need to be in the AFC title game with a chance to win in the fourth quarter and presumably host that game finally. So I think the expectations are absolutely set correctly for this Bills team.
All
right. Very good. That's the time we have here on Believe in Bills, presented by FanDuel. So, Chris, really appreciate it. Again, there's a lot more where that came from, what you heard from him on this show at draftgradebook.com. Chris, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks, Chris.
Really appreciate it. Sal Majorana, Rochester Democrat and Chronicle. I'm Adam Beane, WGRZ TV, Sports Talk Live, Buffalo, Monday night, 7 o'clock on Channel 2 and WGRZ Plus. Thanks for being with us here on Believe in Bills, presented by FanDuel.